Welcome to another edition of the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and Visa, and I'm your host, Femi Abebefe. As always, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Our producer, Elliot Bowman, with us on the ones and twos, the gator on the
Everybody
heater.
knows what the Everybody knows now what the ones and twos are. Nobody knew it. It was your private joke.
Secrets out of the it's out of the bag now, man. I don't even know if I want to continue it now that everybody knows.
Did you Google Jerry Blavitt, the geeter with the heater, the boss of the Big Ten? Didn't you?
I did. He actually has the same birthday as me, which is what I
Well, there you go. You and the geeter.
Me and the geeter, July 3rd. Shout out to it. But
you're a July 3rd birthday? Al Davis was the 4th of July. That was the holiday. That's why all the fireworks went off. That's what he used to tell me. These fireworks are for me. They're not for the country.
the late great Al Davis, 1 day apart from me, so that's good. Also, Tom Cruise, I believe, July 3rd. So
George
a lot of
Steinbrenner.
Steinbrenner.
George Steinbrenner was on the 4th of July. Yeah.
Well, maybe I need to get myself a team. That's what we're figuring out here on this podcast. But in case you don't know, I sound a little bit different because said it on the last podcast. On the road here, doing the yeoman's work out here in San Diego, Michael. Somebody had to do it, so I figured I'd put my hand up and make the trip.
You're entitled to a vacation, Femi. I mean, this is a long season. We all get some time off. We got to do it. Enjoy it. Enjoy that sunshine. I mean, you got to. If not now, when? As Parcells would say, when you look at the Pacific Ocean, it'd take a lot of that to kill you.
Well, you know what? Funny you mentioned sunshine because actually ever since we got here, it's been overcast and rainy. So it's actually given me a little bit of a taste of back home in Seattle. So, I guess I can't outrun this sort of weather. But yeah, not good. But we're still having a good time down here, though. Food's been great. Did a little miniature golf yesterday, working on the short game. So we're getting everything situated down here in San Diego. But let's get into the football news, Michael, because that's why everybody wanted to listen to this podcast. And our boy, Aaron Rodgers, Michael, is out of his darkness retreat, according to the owner of the facility, Scott Berman. I don't know if there's any relation to Bill Berman out there. I'll have you double check on that. But Scott Berman,
I'll look.
Yeah, you make sure you find that out. He's the owner of the Sky Cave Retreats. This is in Southern Oregon. Aaron Rodgers left the dark room and facility on Wednesday, so Rodgers is now out of the darkness into the light, and maybe we'll be closer to a decision here. But the details on this darkness room: 300 square foot room that he was in. He had a queen bed, a bathroom, a meditation-like mat. I mean, he went all the way with this thing, although he was able to turn the lights from the inside, so I don't know if it was 100% darkness, but hey, he's at least out of it now.
Well, I mean, look, he just, kind of sit down there and find your inner self. I mean, slow yourself down, kind of get and connect and see if you can kind of come up with the creativity or the thought process to reemerge. I'm sure it works for people. I think it's awesome that, you've got that you can do that to get those creative juices going. Now, does he want to make $50 million or not? That's what it's going to come down to. You want to keep playing or not? And I think, and talking to more people, the feeling is the Packers have moved on. The Bob McGinn report is accurate. They really feel like Jordan Love, as we said in the last podcast, they can win 8, 9, 10 games with Jordan Love. So they're going to move on. So this is really going to come down to, I want to keep playing. All right, how are we going to work this out? And there's a lot of things to work out. There's a lot of hurdles to jump. There's a lot of conversations that have to be had. I'm sure there'll be a lot of teams interested. Teams that we don't even think will be interested might be interested. But I think Rodgers has got to answer two fundamental questions. He's got to say, I want to play for you, and I want to play 2 to 3 years for you. I think that's going to be it.
Mm-hmm. So you said that teams that we don't think might be interested could be interested. I'm not going to ask you to name names unless you're comfortable naming names. We can break some news here on the podcast, but that is interesting to me. So you think that maybe based on what you've heard, teams who have quote unquote established quarterbacks might ask around and call the Packers to see what it's going to take to bring in Aaron Rodgers?
Look, I think everybody, if you're a general manager and you're doing your job, right? And say you even have Russell Wilson and you're with Denver, you got to call and find out what it cost. I mean, if you're the Rams, you're going to find out what it cost. If you're I don't know if the Cardinals would, but if you're any team, you got to find out what the cost is and what it's going to be to move forward. I mean, how else would you be loyal to your franchise if you didn't do that? And through that, there'll be some teams that may decide, okay, Now we know Gutekunst wants to trade him to the AFC. So,
Yep.
that obviously Cleveland's not going to make that call. But the teams in the AFC that could, I don't think Kansas City or the Chargers would make that call. But there'll be other teams, Tennessee, Indianapolis, obviously. What is it going to cost? And what would it be for me to get him? Let's say Houston calls and says, okay, he'll come play in Houston. I'm not saying he would. But I get him for 2 years. I can draft a quarterback. I can then develop that quarterback while he's here. Now I build the gap. If it's not as expensive, if it's in an Alex Smith price range, like, what Andy Reid paid the 49ers for Alex Smith, that makes sense.
Right now, Aaron Rodgers is 39 years old, under contract for $59.465 million guaranteed if he plays this upcoming season here. So that's a lot of money he'd be leaving on the table if he decided to retire. But the compensation for Green Bay, is it going to be a number one, or is it going to be maybe a couple day two picks because of the uncertainty about Rodgers' future beyond 2023?
I think that's the question, right? I think that's the fundamental question you got to ask yourself. What does it cost? What will this be? They're going to say we want 2 number ones to start off with, right? Mm-hmm. And the answer back to them is, look, why would we pay you 2 number ones if we think he's only going to play 1 year? And he's telling, the agent's saying he's playing 1 year. And so really what's going to come down to is Rodgers is going to say, these are the 3 teams I would play for. And then hopefully 2 of the 3 teams are going to be interested. It could come down to just one of the teams interested. But you got to figure out what the price is. And I don't think that you can bluff your way to say, well, I got 2 number ones on the table. I got this. I'm going to make this deal. You got to call the bluff, say, go ahead and make it.
And the leverage that Rodgers has is that he can always threaten to retire because he doesn't have a no-trade clause in his contract, but I'm sure he's definitely going to have to agree to whichever team calls Green Bay.
But he's going to have to restructure. He's going to have to restructure his contract. So he's part of this transaction. So there's the team, there's the other team, and then there's the agent. The 3 of them are part of the transaction.
Copy. No, that makes a lot of sense here. So there's moving pieces with this Aaron Rodgers deal. We already know that one team has inquired. According to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, the New York Jets have called about Aaron Rodgers. I think they're starting to get the preliminary discussions underway there. And we'll see if the Jets end up deciding to pull the trigger on some sort of a deal with Aaron Rodgers and a restructure. Because I think that's the place that a lot of people would connect him with. Maybe some of these outside places like Tennessee, like maybe in Indianapolis or so, could be a potential for Aaron Rodgers in 2023. So now that he's out of the darkness retreat, we'll keep our eyes on our boy.
Go make some progress. We got the combine. Yeah, we got the combine next week, which is different. It's a different combine than what we're used to because the workouts are at night. There's not as much. A lot of coaching staffs aren't going, so there won't be as much. There'll be a lot of misinformation coming out of it like we typically always get, but there'll be really good information coming out of it based on sources. So as we move closer into next week with all the teams kind of having the convention in Indianapolis, we'll get some clarity, I think, by next week.
All right. Well, we'll keep our ears to the ground on that. How about Justin Fields? What's the latest that you're hearing about my boy?
So I was talking to a bunch of guys, and obviously not you because you wouldn't trade him, but I get the sense that there's a belief in the building that they need somebody to throw the football more effectively. I know you don't believe that. I know that's going to shock you. I know that breaks your heart. But, Ryan Poles and a lot of people in that building feel like they need a better passer. And I feel like they're going to try to do the best that they can do to make a trade without shopping the player. And how do you do that, right? So when Poles is on the phone with these other teams, he's not really offering Fields, but he's listening. He's not offering, but he's listening. And as we get closer to the combine, and he gets closer to examining Bryce Young, and he gets closer to examining C.J. Stroud, and looks at them eye to eye, have meetings, feel like that, I think at the end of the day, I do think the Bears keep the pick, and I think they pick a quarterback. That's my gut read on February 23rd right now. I just get that sense from talking to people in the league. Do I think it's Bryce Young? That's the other sense I get. I feel like they feel they need somebody who can throw the ball consistently They like Fields. They want to get something back for Fields. They don't want to be embarrassed by if you start shopping Fields, you may not get a good deal. Now, Fields has value to me. He's got 3 years left on a rookie contract. The fifth year's a high price, but he's got 2 cheap years. And, you could take him in and some team could develop him as maybe the backup to what they want to do and utilize him to see if you can develop him. I mean, there's a belief that maybe he turns the corner like Jalen Hurts in year 3, like Jalen Hurts turned the corner.
So how do you get value out of this? Because I feel like teams are going to sit there and look at the Chicago Bears and say, all right, well, go ahead and make the pick. If you like Bryce Young, if you like C.J. Stroud, whichever, you said it might be Young as the guy that they prefer, go ahead and pick him. And then you're going to have 2 quarterbacks on your roster. And we'll be here if you want to come and shop. Like, how do you?
They'll make a deal. They'll make a deal before that pick. I mean, they'll make a deal. They'll figure out. There'll be enough teams to call them and say, hey, we'll give you X for Fields. And,
okay, so there's interest.
They have no skin in the field game, right? They didn't draft Field.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Kevin Warren is the new president, right? They got Ryan Poles is the new GM. Eberflus is the new head coach. None of these guys were in the building when they picked Fields. I mean, the guys that picked Fields were Ryan Pace down in Atlanta. Maybe you call Atlanta up. I mean, Fields from Georgia.
Yep.
Got Pace down there. He knows the kid. Arthur Smith could see a Mariota-type quarterback in this guy. Bring him in, let him compete with Ryder. Right? So it costs you a second-round pick. To me, that's a pretty good deal for the Bears, and it's a good deal for the Falcons. You get a young quarterback to compete with your young quarterback at an economic value that runs an offense that would fit perfectly into the offense that you run. Right? I mean, Atlanta could put him in there, and he could run what they run. Now, could you win a title with him? I don't know. I think that's the issue. Can he improve his passing? I don't know. Mariota hasn't improved his passing. Can Ryder improve his passing? I think that's another question mark you got to look at.
So then who's the person that makes that call? Is it Atlanta has to make the call first, right? Chicago can't make these calls because at that point, everybody knows that Chicago's looking to deal him.
Right. I think what's going to happen is because it's kind of out there quietly, I think teams will say, are you guys going to trade Fields? And, it's going to be confidential. We might listen. I don't know. The answer polls would give is, probably not. But if you want to make us a blockbuster offer, we'll certainly listen to everybody on our team's event. Look, this whole notion that, there's no sacred cows on any team. I mean, what? There's 8 or 10 players in the league that you wouldn't trade. I mean, if somebody called the Ravens up for Lamar Jackson and they offered them 3 number 1s, 3 number 2s, they're probably going to take that deal.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fascinating stuff here with a potential trade, because I think a lot of people think that Chicago moves out of that number 1 overall pick and then would trade down. But based on what you're hearing, and it goes in line with the La Canfora report that we talked about in the last podcast, that multiple GMs and front office people think that Justin Fields is going to be traded, and that's what you've been hearing as well. So, my man, I might have to root for a new team here.
I would say this. I would not rule out them trading down and still picking a quarterback. See, I don't. Really? I wouldn't rule that out. I could see them trading with somebody to that if they like Stroud and somebody wants Young. I could see that too. I mean, look, you've got to consider every option. You can't be narrow-minded and focused because what happens is you're not improving your team. You've got to be completely open-minded.
So that is really interesting. If they were to trade down and then also take a quarterback as well in this spot. I mean, so if you trade down, would Fields still be on the roster at that point, or do you think that have just traded Fields?
I think they'll trade Fields before. I think they'll trade Fields before the draft. Look, you're not going to trade Fields. The draft pick only has value on the day of the draft. You can't trade Fields once the draft's over.
Yeah. No, so pretty much you think that you would be surprised. Let me put it this way. You would be surprised if Fields is the quarterback week 1 of the Chicago Bears.
I would be. Yeah, I would be. I would say it's 50-50. I would think that I think right now it's way too early for any draft guru to say that's going to happen or me to say it's going to happen because, everybody has grades on players right now. They haven't met all the players. They haven't looked at the players. The medicals aren't in. I mean, you might fall in love with – you might say, okay, we'll take Anthony Richardson because we think we can fix him and make him a better passer. I'm making this up. But you haven't met the kid yet. You haven't really spent enough time with the kid. So I think that's something that there's not enough data on the plate right now.
Well, speaking of Anthony Richardson, I know we plan to talk about it later, but let's talk about it right now there because I think that's a perfect segue because in the betting market, what we do, Michael, here at VSiN, a lot of chatter yesterday about the odds movement for the first overall draft pick across a number of sports books at our sponsor, DraftKings. On February 16th, so just a week ago today, Richardson was 100-1 to be the first overall pick. Now he's 30-1. At other books, he's now plus 700 and has surpassed Will Levis in that market here. Is the chatter about Richardson more positive within the league than it is outside of the league?
Oh, I think Richardson's – look, I thought this was a player that had a really chance to win a Heisman Trophy. And – you love highlight tapes more than any human being on planet Earth. So I could make you a highlight tape of Richardson, and you would think the guy's incredible.
Oh, I'm already going to love Michael.
I mean, I know you are. I know you are. And I loved him too. Like, I didn't understand why they were – when Mullen was there, I didn't understand why they were playing the other kid. I went back and watched his high school tape. That's how much I love this kid. I mean, he's 6'4". He's 200 – I mean, he's Cam Newton.
Yep.
He's Cam Newton size, and he's got speed. Now, the thing you got to figure out is, can we get him to throw the ball effectively? Is he going to work hard? All those intangibles that make up the player. But I think the talent's real. The production's not real. The talent's real.
The production from Richardson last year, 17 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 2,500 passing yards, 6-6 in the SEC there at Florida. So his production is very pedestrian, and it's not what you'd want from somebody that you would think of as a number 1 overall pick. In fact, Power 5 QBs to be selected in the first round without any first-team all-conference selection since 2011. I mean, look at the names here. Jake Locker, Blaine Gabbert, Christian Ponder, Ryan Tannehill, Daniel Jones. Like, that's not the class that you want to be in, but Richardson as a talent, though, is just so otherworldly to where if I was a general manager, and I guess it's easy for me to say because I just got to speak into a microphone. I don't have to answer these questions to the owner and all that stuff. But I think he's worth the risk because I feel like that kind of a quarterback is required to win Super Bowls and to beat the guy that we just saw, number 15 in Kansas City. Like, you need somebody that has that big-time talent in order to do so.
Well, I think you got to figure out who is the kid, right? I mean, so let's just say Anthony Richardson wasn't recruited out of high school. Let's just say he showed up at Wyoming and played 3 years at Wyoming. What would he have looked like?
Yeah. You'd hope it'd be Josh Allen.
Yeah, you'd hope it would be like that. So Josh Allen got fixed. I mean, here's a kid that didn't throw above 60% in any year of his career in college football, which has a bunch of bubbles. So there's work to do. The question is, can you fix it? This is a little bit like in baseball, taking a high school kid, a pitcher in baseball that, has great velocity on the ball. He's a great athlete. Can you get him to be able to nibble the plates? Can you improve that ability to work the corners? And if you feel like you can, you get a legit prospect. If you don't, you fail. I mean, this isn't one of those E.J. Manuel where he's a good athlete with great size. No, this is a unique athlete with a lot of skill. So you're building something here. And E.J. Manuel went, the 15th pick in the draft one year by Buffalo. So
yeah,
this is a different kind of guy. But I do think, to me, there's a lot of work that needs to get done. And the more work that gets done on the kid, it'll certainly help him. But I will say this. Lamar Jackson's collegiate career compared to Anthony Richardson, it's not even close.
Yeah, it's not close.
But we're in such a desperate need for quarterbacks. I mean, Lamar had to sit in that room till the 32nd pick of the draft.
Yeah. And he won the freaking Heisman Trophy at Louisville. like Lamar had way better production here. So last question on Richardson. Do you think that this is smart money that's betting him to go number 1 overall, or is this dumb money based on what you've heard?
I don't think it's a St. Jude's pick. I don't. I think to me, these kind
Ooh,
of got.
okay.
I don't think it's a St. Jude's one. I think this is, and I met the president of St. Jude's, and it was great. I loved him. I told him, I said, we'll do anything for, because we promote the hell out of St. Jude's on the show, because there are some dumb St. Jude. They just better give the money to St. Jude's than that. But I think to me, I think by this time next week, we'll have a better understanding of where this guy is. Look, everybody that talks about him says, man, he's really talented.
Yeah.
Right. You got to know about the kid. You got to know about the work ethic. You got to know all that stuff before you. It's easy to sit at home and say, yeah, but you got to figure out, can he improve?
It puts a smile on my face that you say that's not a St. Jude's pick there. We might be live here with Richardson going number 1 overall. Don't want to get too far ahead of things.
I did not say that. I did not say that.
No, I know. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I'm just saying
when you're done watching your highlight tape, I'm sure you'll love it.
Oh, I've already watched the tape, buddy. I've watched the tape. I'm ready to go to war with this kid. Maybe rookie of the year. Who knows? We're getting way too far in advance here. But let's take our first break, Michael. We'll talk about the defensive coordinator interview that folks around the league are discussing here. This is the GM Shuffle. All right. Last podcast, Michael, we talked about Rex Ryan potentially being a defensive coordinator for the Denver Broncos. He had emerged as potentially a favorite, but you're hearing differently from people that you've spoken with here about this defensive coordinator job in the Denver Broncos. What did you find out when you asked folks about Rex Ryan?
I think what happens is, so you have to understand this, right? And I was told this reliably that, with the money being so great for coordinators, people that have been retired for a long time, oh, wait a minute, this guy's making X. I was a great coordinator. I should come back in the league and start making that kind of money. That's head coaching money. So I think there's a little bit of that. And I don't think Rex was really prepared to be a coach again until these salaries started to go way up. And so what I was told was that it wasn't, it was, there's no way he's not going to get the job. I don't think he's kept up in the coaching world to come back in and all of a sudden just have it. Like, I don't think this is just, I think it was money motivated, not the love of the game motivated. And because of that, I think he'll just go back to ESPN and keep doing that. I mean, he's got a great job there. He's a Jet coach. They love Jet coaches at Countdown. They love that. That's perfect. So, why not? But I think to me, it was one of those where it was more of I'm interested because of the money, but yet when you present yourself, that doesn't work.
Matt Patricia's been talked about as a potential defensive coordinator for that job. I believe he's been interviewing for that position here. We've heard Chris Richard as well as Vance Joseph, another name that we've talked about, who actually used to be the head coach of the Denver Broncos. That would be an interesting dynamic if he came back as a DC here. When do you think Denver's going to make a decision?
I mean, Sean's not competing with anybody, so he really doesn't have to make a decision. He's got to get the right guy. I think you're going to see a lot of evolution in Denver over the next 7-8 months. I think you're going to see a lot of moving pieces, and I think Sean's going to take his time, measure it out, find out what he needs, then after the draft, find out what he could do to supplement it. I mean, look, he's running the whole operation, and so why wouldn't he take his time? Because he doesn't want to have to do it twice, Like, if you don't have time to do it right the first time, how are you going to find time to do it right the second time? So I think he's going to take his time. And I think ultimately, he'll want somebody on the defensive front that can cut, that will do what he wants, because Sean is a little bit of a head coach. I mean, he's just not just a play caller. He's got some Parcells in him to run that. So I think he'll do that, and I think he'll get the guys in the building that he's worked with and feels most comfortable with.
You think Patricia's a good fit for him?
I think one thing Patricia will do is he'll do what the head coach wants him to do. And Patricia's coached in a lot of different variations of defense. So, he's got he's coached 34, he's coached 4-3, he's multiple defensive coach, And I think the sticking point for Vance Joseph has to be, would you want to come back in the building as been a head coach once, even though it's a different building? Now you're still in the same building. You were the head coach, now you're not. That's an ego. That's a little bit. You gotta rectify that with your ego.
Yeah, no, that'd be a hard situation for I think most people to go back to. And like you said, it's a different organization now than it was when Vance Joseph was there. New ownership, new general manager, so it's not quite the same. But still, even just going there and seeing everything that, like, hey, that used to be my office. Now I'm down the hall.
Yeah.
Like, what's like that? That's a little bit of a different dynamic. Let's keep it moving though with the quarterback news here, because Derek Carr, we heard that he had his visit with the New York Jets. Apparently, the visit went really well, according to ESPN's Diana Rossini. In fact, it went so well that during the pitch, the Jets pitched to Carr that, quote, he could become a first ballot Hall of Famer if he came to New York. Your thoughts, Michael?
I mean,
Shaking your head.
I don't know what to say to that. I don't know what to say to that. Like, do they know how? I mean, first of all, first ballot Hall of Famers win titles. They make playoffs. They get to playoff games. I mean, Carr is one of those quarterbacks that, if you went out and worked out Carr, you would just absolutely love Carr. But there's games that are there to be won that haven't been won. And you're good at making excuses. You can make excuses and say, well, he didn't have a very good defense and yada, yada, yada. I mean, the guy's played in 142 games. He's won 63 of them. And no one's ever going to say, well, he's just so tough that he just keeps playing when he's hurt. No one's going to say he's just so tough that he makes things happen. No, they're not going to say that. I mean, he's had two really good offensive coaches. And, he's had John Gruden and he's had Josh McDaniels. And both of those guys, Gruden, that they went 10-7 that one year. Gruden wasn't the coach. They had a hard time getting him to make plays at clutch times. Hall of Fame players make plays at clutch times. Hall of Fame players just don't pass for yards. I know he's got 35,000 career yards passing. He's wonderful to watch. I know he's got 217 touchdown passes. He throws the ball really well. But at the end of the day, what plays does he make? I mean, he went to the Pro Bowl this year. Last time he went to the Pro Bowl was in 2017. Now, I mean, as a talent, he's very talented. There's no doubt. But he's got to win games and make plays. And you say, well, it's a supporting cast. That's your line. It's a supporting. When Peyton Manning or some other quarterback wins without a supporting cast, nobody says a thing. Great players make the good players better. I don't even know how you could. I don't know. I think that's the problem with the Hall of Fame. That what the Jets said there is exactly the problem with the Hall of Fame. We don't really know what a Hall of Fame player looks like. We think we do, but we really don't. Because Deion's right. There should be levels to the Hall. Like for Deion Sanders to wear a Hall of Fame jacket and Tommy McDonald, the wide receiver, wear the same jacket, they're different Hall of Famers. If you want to put Tommy McDonald in, that's great. That's wonderful. But and I'm sure his family appreciates it and all that. But Deion, I mean, like Andre Reed's in the Hall of Fame. Good player, really good player. Did you ever drive to the stadium and say, oh, my God, we're playing Andre Reed today? No. You drive to the stadium, you're playing Derek Carr, you're saying, let's make sure we get him on the ground early in the game. We got to hit him early. We'll get his eye level down. We got to hit him early. That's what you're saying. You're not saying, oh, my God, we're playing a Hall of Fame player. To me, this verbiage coming out of New York is desperation verbiage.
So you're saying that Derek Carr's not going to make FDR, football done right. I don't think we're going to see the Derek Carr chapter in there. Also, in defense to the Jets, my guess is this is obviously a little bit of hyperbole. Would be my guess, because it's a recruiting pitch and all that stuff. Like, I don't think they necessarily believe what they're saying. The fact that they said it, I think, is hilarious, because I'm in lockstep with you on Carr. Like, I don't think that he's anywhere close to being a Hall of Fame quarterback. Obviously, I think that'd be a ridiculous conversation to even have. I even have questions about him just being a good quarterback in today's NFL on Derek Carr. But I think this was a little recruiting pitch, right? Like they were going a little over the top here to sell him on come to the Jets.
Right. So, like when you look at the and I'm going to find it here. When you look at this is completely objective, right? This isn't Michael Lombardi talking because his son coached Derek Carr. This is completely objective, right?
Because that's what they're going to say.
Well, right. I get that, and I can handle that. Like I don't need my son to tell me what to think. All right, I'm okay with that. I love him. I love him to death, and but I don't need him to tell me. I'm going to make up my own mind. He's going to make up his own mind. We're going to be independent. That's the way I wanted him. All right, but let's take an independent service. So Pro Football Reference, okay? Mm-hmm. They have a section in Pro Football Reference that basically it's called the Hall of Fame Monitor, that they have come up with a configuration of what a Hall of Fame quarterback looks like, okay? Average Hall of Fame quarterback, right? And so, they typically win 2 championships. They make 7 Pro Bowls. They play 13 years. They throw 270 touchdown passes, yada, yada, yada. And then they rank them. And then it's like Bart Starr falls below the average. Terry Bradshaw falls below the average. Joe Namath falls below the average, right? Eli Manning's below the average, right? Troy Aikman's well below the average. Jim Kelly's well below the average. And I'm not saying this is right, okay? And so they come up with a number for the player. So Tom Brady's number is 263.03. Peyton Manning's number is 257.80. Aaron Rodgers is 192.43. Johnny Unitas is 162.7. Montana's 154.17. Okay? Got that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Derek Carr in this rating system. In this system, Derek Carr's rating is 39.7. He's below Dante Culpepper, Ron Jaworski, Steve DeBerg. I mean, Jeff Garcia, Kirk Cousins, Michael Vick, Lamar Jackson, Mark Brunell. I mean, you want me to keep going on? Like, so when you make this statement, this isn't me. This is numerical numbers. Yeah. So when you're talking about a Hall of Famer, the game is different. When Namath went in the Hall of Fame, Namath threw a ton of interceptions because they played a bunch of man-to-man. The interceptions were higher. There was 7-step drop game. But Cam Newton's at 70.5. Do you think Cam Newton's a Hall of Famer?
Ooh, no. He's a fringe guy. I think he's a Ring of Honor guy in Carolina, but doesn't quite make the Hall of Fame.
Jim Kelly's at 59.1. Troy Aikman was at 64. Cam Newton's at 70. I mean, Warren Moon was just slightly above him at 71. He made the Hall of Fame, never went to a Super Bowl, never went to one conference championship game. So my point here is, at some point, we have a really hard time in scouting and evaluation of separating what's good to what's great. And the Hall of Fame has let a lot of good players in. Zach Thomas is a wonderful player. Is he a Hall of Famer? I don't think so, okay? No. I don't think so. I never drove to the stadium saying, how the fuck are we going to block Zach Thomas? I mean, I'm happy he's in the Hall of Fame. But what that does to the Hall is it dilutes some of the other players who are elite at their position. How is Zach Thomas and Ray Lewis in the same Hall? How is Zach Thomas and Dick Butkus in the same Hall? How is Zach Thomas and Ray Nitschke in the same Hall? How is Zach Thomas and Willie Lanier in the same Hall? And this is what we get, but we get this. This is the rhetoric we get. It's like I was doing a show yesterday, and a reporter we had on, he said there's at least 15 to 20 number one receivers in the league. He doesn't even know what a number one receiver looks like if he says that comment.
Yeah. And those are the people that vote on who gets into the Hall of Fame.
That's the people that vote. Exactly. That's the people that vote. I mean, so you get a guy that's played really well that can't get himself in the Hall of Fame, and so that's what happens. And you have a bunch of guys that are in the Hall of Fame that you're sitting there saying, okay, like you take Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown's numbers, and I only played 7 years, so that dilutes him. But Antonio Brown's numbers are Hall of Fame worthy if he would have played longer. Yep. If he would have played longer, they're Hall of Fame worthy. But he didn't. So you can't, but he's easy to dismiss because of his off-the-field behavior.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, like Steve Smith got passed over. All right, Steve Smith Jr. got passed over in this round. Steve Smith gets passed over. I mean, the guy's got 81 career touchdowns and 100, and so he starts 198 games. He has 1,031 catches, 14,000 yards. Played 14 years in the league. He got passed over. Meanwhile, you got guys like Drew Pearson's in the Hall of Fame. Harold Carmichael got in the Hall of Fame. You go down the list. I mean, there's Tommy McDonald's in the Hall of Fame. I mean, these guys are not. I mean, Tommy, who would you rather have? Would you rather have Steve Smith or that? Or would you rather have Shannon Sharp or Sterling Sharp? Sterling Sharp can't even get in. He can't get a sniff.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because he doesn't have anybody in the room pounding the table for him, because that's how a lot of these guys end up making to the Hall of Fame. You need your presenter to pound the table.
65 touchdowns catches in 595 receptions. Do the math on that. How many times is he putting the ball in the end zone, and yet he can't get in there? Well, they say, well, he only played 7 years. Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
What about Terrell Davis? What about Tony Basella? Yeah. I mean, he's got 65 touchdowns. Right. Harold Carmichael played in how many games? Harold Carmichael has, 78 touchdowns and 590 catches. Okay. I like that ratio. I get that. He played 11 years in the league. I mean, Tyreek Hill's got 63 and 598 catches. We think Tyreek Hill is the most disruptive player in the league, and his numbers are not as good as what Shannon Sharp's numbers are, Sterling Sharp's numbers are.
It's all distorted, and that's why I'm excited for your book to come out.
It's all PR. So when the Jets add that fuel to the fire, they kill it.
Yeah. Well, Derek Carr, maybe if he goes to the Jets, he could be a great quarterback for them. But I have my doubts. I especially have my doubts in terms of him making the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Michael, let's take another break. On the other side, we'll talk about Carr's former employer, the Las Vegas Raiders, in their pursuit of their next quarterback. All right, well, we don't think Derek Carr is going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback, Michael, but he's no longer going to be the Las Vegas Raiders quarterback. That we know for certain. And Vegas Raiders general manager Dave Ziegler was asked about what they might do at quarterback on the Bussin' with the Boys podcast hosted by Taylor Lewan. Here's what Dave Ziegler had to say about their timeline in finding a new signal caller.
Myself and, our group were in charge of filling the most important position on the team. And so, yeah, there's some, there's some pressure that comes along with that. And however we fill it, it doesn't mean we're going to have an immediate answer, this year. You know what I mean? And so, but at the end of the day, we have to have an answer.
Right.
In some form or fashion, and so, yeah, there's pressure that comes along with it. And again, that's also part of the excitement too, is that pressure, is finding that guy.
Can you translate that for us, Michael?
Yeah, sure. But the way I read that is we could draft a guy, but he's going to sit. We're going to sign a veteran to get us through the next year, and we're going to keep searching to find the right guy. We're not going to just force it because we need a quarterback. We're not going to just force it. We're going to find the guy that fits what we're doing. We're going to scout inside out, and then when we get him here, we're not going to push him out there and destroy him. We're going to sign Jarrett Stidham back, let him compete, maybe sign a veteran guy, let him compete, draft a guy that we love and we can develop. I think it's no different than what Andy Reid did when he first went to Kansas City. Signed Alex Smith, traded for Alex Smith, got him in there, won some games, got Alex Smith dressed up, built the rest of his team around Alex Smith. Oh, there's Patrick Mahomes. I'm going to go get him. I think that's what we're talking about. And I think you got to, the thing is all these Raider fans, they want to fire the coach every 2 years. Well, the reason you're not winning and you can't get a quarterback is because you never have a plan that lasts longer than 6 games. Like you gotta be able to lay a foundation. Either you want to do it the right way or you don't. I mean, so that's really what it's about. Like, I think that's a really good answer he gave. He's like, look, we're going to keep finding a guy. But if I just take one, I mean, just take a – Doug Whatley took to E.J. Manuel. How'd that work for him? He got fired. Mm-hmm. You take one that can't play. I mean, Ryan Pace was able to take 2 of them. And both guys he took might not be able to play. I mean, Steve Keim took they took Rosen, and then he comes back and takes Murray. I mean, so like you got to take one that fits. You don't want to do it over again. Like that's the problem with this. You have team needs, and then you fill the need, and you still have a need.
Yeah, that's a disaster. Sometimes taking that guy that ultimately does not work out, especially if you continue to pour resources into that player there. So I guess based on hearing that quote and hearing how you translated what Dave Ziegler had to say, it sounds like Stidham probably coming back, maybe a free agent signing of Jimmy Garoppolo. People can make that connection, knowing Josh McDaniels' scheme from their time back in New England. And then perhaps if the right quarterback is there at 7 to take that guy, do you ever foresee the Raiders trading up to take a quarterback in this draft, or do you think that they'll let somebody fall to them, and if that guy is who they like, they would take them and add him to the room there?
I mean, I think if the Raiders had a conviction about a player, they'll trade up to get him. Is there someone in this draft that they'll have a conviction about? I don't know. I think it's too early, but I do think they'll try to. Now they got to fix their roster. I mean, Femi, you can't have as many bad drafts as the Raiders have had with guys no longer on the team and still think you're going to be good enough, right? You just can't. I mean, I think they'll get Josh Jacobs. I think I'm sure they'll franchise him. We'll talk about it in the next block, but I think they'll do that. They'll keep him on the team, but they got to fix their defense. I mean, their defense, other than Max Crosby, they got to get better defensive players. They have no linebackers that can run. The secondary is not very – I mean, this is not a good team defensively. Like, when you blow Abrams, Farrell, Ruggs, you start blowing all those picks, go through it. What do you have?
You can't do that. And those are all first round picks. like this roster should be so much better than it is right now.
It's and people have this expectation like the Raiders, it's like Carr's a Hall of Famer. The Raiders are a playoff team. The fact that the Raiders won as many games as they did is kind of like almost a miracle based on the talent level that they had. I know they got Devontae Adams, and he's great, and they've got to make sure that they have a way to do that. And, they've got a great running back, and they've got a tight end that they've got to get more out of, but they're going to have to improve their overall team to compete at the level.
You think somebody like Anthony Richardson out of Florida for the Raiders? I know we talked about him earlier in the pod, but based on what you're saying they don't want to rush a guy out there if he's not ready, let him groom and kind of just develop in the quarterback room, maybe have some veterans ahead of him. Would that be a good fit for the Silver and Black?
I think if they felt like he could handle it from all levels, the work habits, I think it's too early to tell. What kind of kid is it? That's the key is, who is the kid? If Richardson reaches the level of Jalen Hurts, it's going to be because he has Jalen Hurts-like character. Don't dismiss Hurts' character and why he became so good.
100%. 100%. And we talked about that after the Super Bowl and his development as a passer and just what he's done in Philadelphia there. It's probably the best quarterback in the NFC right now if Rodgers ends up leaving the conference, what he was able to do this past season. Michael, let's take our final break, and we will preview the franchise tag candidates on the other side. It's the GM Shuffle. Okay, Michael, the franchise tag deadline set for March 7th, but the window is now open, so I figured this would be a good time to talk about some of the notable franchise tag candidates. And I'm a Cowboys fan, so let's start there. Yeah. My man Tony Pollard, Michael, is he coming back on the tag, or are they going to let him test the open waters?
No, I mean, it's too cheap. It's too cheap not to bring him back. First of all, I think there's a misconception out there that if you have a running back that's a weapon in the passing game, that's just not a runner, that can change the game in the passing game, you got to pay him. This whole notion you can't pay running backs is ridiculous. You can find a running back. You can't find explosive players like Pollard or Dalvin Cook or guys like that. I think the mistake they made was when they paid Zeke and didn't use him in the passing game. They got to pay Pollard. They're going to have Pollard's part of their team. So I think they definitely would. Now, I think when you do that, like if I'm the Raiders and I franchise Jacobs, which I would, I'd get another running back, a young, whether it's Zaire White, I don't know if they have him there, but I would basically do what Sean Payton did in New Orleans with Kamara and Ingram and rotate them and keep them fresh and have them on the field at the same time. Take that Christian McCaffrey approach. Like, let's just say, the Panthers wanted to sign Cordell Patterson. They wanted to sign Hassan Riddick back, but they were waiting for the Deshaun Watson verdict to see what was going to happen. They had to save cap room for that. So by doing that, they lost Patterson back to Atlanta, and they lost Riddick to Philadelphia. But just say Patterson was on the Panthers team with McCaffrey. Now you got something going. Now you got two guys who play two positions. You got two guys who can really impact the passing game. You got two really good runners, and they can play at the same time. And that's what you want to try to get to. The key to being successful in football is to substitute without substituting. Substitute without substituting. Because it forces the defense to have to play catch up. If you have to substitute to then get what you want, the defense can substitute too to create the matchups that they want. But what makes San Francisco so hard, like this whole notion that McCaffrey is great and McCaffrey is a luxury item for the 49ers. He's tremendous. He's a great player. But because of their running backs and the fullback's ability to move around and do all those things, they substitute without substituting. That's the key. And so Pollard allows you to do that. Kamara allows you to do that. Jacobs allows you to do that. Aaron Jones allows you to do that. So you pay those guys.
Yeah, I think that's really a great point of being able to change formations and do different things without taking guys off of the field.
It's not formations, Femi. It's personnel groups. See, formations don't matter anymore in football. Here's what doesn't matter anymore in football. Downs and formations. Mm-hmm. They don't matter. Okay, so the only thing that matters is personnel groups. Who's on the field? So if I'm a linebacker and I could substitute you off the field, so if I'm a linebacker and you can't play against 11 or you can't play against 13 or you can't play against your value goes way down. It's about formation. Yeah. So this whole notion, well, he's a good third down player. What is that? That doesn't mean anything. Every down's third down.
Yeah. Okay. No, being multiple essentially is what we're trying to get at here, is being multiple on the field and being able to be versatile so that they can't just take you off whenever it's a passing situation or running situation. Because like you said, every down is now third down in the National Football League. The tag number being 10.1 million, you don't think that should deter teams for running backs at that number there?
No.
Being 10.1? Okay.
If he's a weapon, I mean, he can impact the game. I mean, if you have a running back that can win on third down and run option routes or run the ball on third down, $10 million, I mean, those are the downs, and then score in the red zone, you got to pay that guy. And this whole analytical nonsense, well, I mean, look, I mean, with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, they paid Chubb. They're not going to pay. I mean, Hunt is a valuable guy in the marketplace because he could be the perfect blend to this, right? So say you sign Kareem Hunt, and you're Atlanta, and you got Kareem Hunt and Patterson. Now you got something. But Atlanta had two young running backs, so really good. So, they had the Huntley kid that they drafted, so they don't need a back. But my point here is when you could do that, and then the back can extend from the formation like a receiver and win in the slot against a corner on an option route or an angle route or any kind of a crossing route. Now you got something. Now you play base, you play nickel. What are we doing here?
Yeah, no, I totally agree there with the running back position. I would like to see Pollard back in Dallas. I'm sure Raiders fans would like to see Josh Jacobs, and Giants fans would like to welcome back Saquon Barkley. How about at quarterback, though? Because we talked about Lamar Jackson. We talked about Daniel Jones. We haven't talked about Geno Smith up in Seattle. That quarterback tag number, $32.4 million. Geno Smith, a free agent this offseason. I would guess that they tag him to give themselves a little bit longer time to negotiate a long-term contract. Is that your read on it, Michael?
I think they're going to basically say, look, we're going to tag the guy, and if we don't get a tag, we want to do a contract, and at the end, if we can't get a deal done, we'll tag him. I mean, here's the deal. What you got to do in these conversations are, look, we're either going to do a deal, but if we tag you, it's a one-year deal. There's got to be every negotiation has to have a deadline in it. I mean, when you go to Japan and negotiate with the Japanese, they don't really start negotiating with you until 5 hours before you have to go to the airport to get your flight. They want to put a sense of urgency into it, right? They show you around, they show you the tropical gardens, you go eat sushi, do all that stuff, right? Now with 5 hours to go, we're going to sit down here. Well, I got to catch a flight. Well, we got to get this done. It's the same thing in negotiation, right? I gotta look. If we tag you, it's 1 year. Just so you know that we're not negotiating past this. We'll live because we're going to live with it on our cap. Either you help us with our cap before we get there, or you're going to be on the cap for 1 year. That's up to you. You got to decide. If you don't put a deadline, if you just let this thing linger, it's the old saying: I don't need more time. I need a deadline. You need a deadline in negotiations.
That's an interesting way to go about it there from an organizational standpoint, because I think we saw the Dallas Cowboys, especially with Dak Prescott, when they had him on the tag, and they would still have negotiations afterwards, and then they would eventually come to a long-term agreement after franchise
tagging. That wasn't a negotiation. That was a surrender. That was a surrender. That wasn't there's surrenders and then there's negotiations, right? That's a surrender. Yeah. You know?
You think my man Jerry surrendered to the Dax camp?
Of course he did. I mean, he gave him all that money. Now they're all saying he's not worth it. Well, he wasn't worth it. But the famous line, well, what was our choices? If we didn't pay it, what were we going to do? Okay. Well, that's the part of being a great organization, is figure out a solution to it. It's what Ziegler was saying in the last block. We're not going to be held hostage here. You know, it would be easy to bring Carr back and say, okay, we know he's not good enough, but at least he helps us win. It's the same thing they're saying in Green Bay. Look, we won 8 or 9 games with them. You know, we can win 8 or 9 games with Love. Let's just go on with Love. I mean, look, Geno Smith, they got rid of Russell Wilson. They won more games with Geno than they did with they made the playoffs with Geno. Well, Russell, you know, at some point in negotiations, you got to say no, and you got to be willing to move on. And you can't let the press affect you in the negotiation.
Who would you be more comfortable paying, Daniel Jones or Geno Smith?
Geno.
Yeah, same. I don't even think it's a conversation. I think it's Geno Smith, the reigning comeback player of the year. Orlando Brown, though, is an interesting one for the Kansas City Chiefs at offensive tackle. He played on the tag this past year. If they tag him again, it'll be $19.9 million, so almost $20 million. Do you think that they let Orlando Brown head into free agency as an unrestricted free agent?
I mean, I think he reps himself, too. I don't, you know, I mean, I can't imagine somebody's going to give him an average of $20 million a year when you watch him. You know, I think he needs to be, you know, he played well in the Super Bowl. I give him that, right? I think there's no doubt about that. But I think it's, you know, but they had a hard time getting a contract done with him. And there's only so many players you can pay that level. You know, now they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do with Frank Clark. He's making way too much money for them. I think Frank Clark's on their cap. He's due to make $20 million this year in base salary. So they're not going to pay that, right? So, but I think you're going to have to figure something out. Look, to me, how do you pay Orlando Brown more than you pay Kelsey?
Doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, it doesn't make sense to me at all.
Doesn't make a lot of sense.
I mean, look, and, you know, you got Chris Jones. You know, he's making a good boatload of money. But I think Orlando Brown, you got to be – now, what's your option? You still have – you can draft a guy. You know, would you rather draft a guy or would you rather pay him?
I think at that
you
number,
can't have it both ways. Not everybody can eat here at the diner.
It's not Denny's. we can't
no, it's not there. We're not there.
We're not there yet. The fact that they tagged him last year and didn't want to give him the long-term extension, I feel like that was them saying, "All right, like we want you to come back, but not at these kind of numbers." And I think if you're Kansas City, you probably already mentally prepared yourself to move on this offseason from Orlando Brown. Now, in his defense, 4 sacks allowed on 1,100 snaps, 4th consecutive Pro Bowl, whatever you put into that. He at least was a solid player for them, but at these numbers, I think you got to let him walk.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think when you see the deal is when you compare him to other guys, you know, he certainly, but I mean, he thinks he's going to get $22, $23 million a year. And so this isn't about, do we want to pay him that? This is about, can we pay other players if we pay him? You got $22 million at left tackle. You got $15 million at left guard. You know, you got the center and the right guard are on rookie contracts, and you got Wiley. You got a lot of money in the line.
Well, it certainly paid off in the Super Bowl when they held that Eagles' fearsome pass rush to 0 sacks, helping them win the game in a second title in 4 years. All right, that does it for this week's edition on the podcast. Next week, it'll be Combine Week. Michael, we've teased that we'll have a lot of information coming out of the Combine, so I'm looking forward to that. Maybe my guy Anthony Richardson lights Lucas Oil on fire with a good workout, and we get this thing on a rocket ship, and we're heading towards the moon. We'll see what happens, but I can't wait to talk all about it with the tag. We'll have more news from these power brokers.
Are you back Monday? Are you back Monday for our pod on Monday? Are you back?
Yeah,
all right, good.
I'll be back in Vegas on Monday. Yeah, we'll be back there.
All right,
So
good.
we'll be all settled.
We'll see you Monday.
I head back Saturday night. I head back to Las Vegas. So we'll be back and ready to rock Monday morning. But
you better get that You better get that Sopranos Netflix going. I'm just telling you right now.
the HBO Max is locked and loaded. We will be binging it over the weekend. So Sunday, that's my only task, is to watch Sopranos episodes from sun up to sundown. We'll see how many I make it through there. But thank you once again to our producer, Elliot Bowman, the Gator with the heater on the ones and twos, whatever you want to call him. He's the very best at it. And also thank you to DraftKings and to V's. And thank you to you, Michael. And I'll talk to you Monday morning.
Thank you, Femi. Thank you, Elliot.
Thanks for watching the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi. And for more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to VSiN Live and the GM Shuffle podcast with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN, wherever you get your podcasts.